think librarianship in general is becoming more embracing two things that you mentioned. The way histories are told inside of and counter stories, because I do critical race theory, and the broadening of narratives, and then the acceptance of who's in our in the workspace and the profession. So I didn't want to, in setting it up for the audience, and as you continue, I didn't want folks to miss the really rich experiences that you bring to what you do and how you do it, both on a personal and professional level.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that note about Philadelphia. The institution that I was working at is actually across the street from Independence Hall, where the Declaration of Independence was signed. It's down the street from the Liberty Bell. It's right next to the Constitution Center. So it's in Old City, Philadelphia, which has basically over the decades built itself up to sort of a living museum of all these old cultural institutions. So we were very, very much embedded. Thomas Jefferson was concurrently the president of the institution that I was working in and president of the United States. Like, it's just hard to overstate like how embedded in traditional American Republic foundation that this institution was. And because of that, when we're thinking about what sort of archivist we want to be and where our situation is in relation to the history of our field, as librarians, as archivists, as manuscript curators, in that whole sort of circle of professions. It's always very interesting to think about where your situation is, right? So at a place like that in Philadelphia, we were interested in a lot of really, really interesting things. So there's a lot of room for growth as a librarian. Maybe though that institution at the time, and honestly, a lot has changed in the 5 or so years since I've been gone. But at the time, that institution wasn't quite as ready to take on the same sort of questions that a lot of us have started to want to ask. Like, we were not in a position at that institution at that time to really ask how it is that we grapple with the history of our own field and what that means for our day-to-day job, like what that means for our day job. So it's very interesting to counterpose the public institution that I went on to, Louisiana State University. We have a public mission, unlike the American Philosophical Society. As a public institution and the largest at the state of Louisiana, we have a public mission to lift up our community as an entire state. And we could really use that type of public mission to justify a lot of the concerns that we wanted to address. Because we could say something like, look, this is what the population demographic breakdown is of our state. And this is what the representation is in our special collections and archives. This is not serving our state as well as it could be. And I published a couple of things about this over the last few years about really thinking about anti-racist action through library policy, right? Because it's the type of thing that can make people nod off in boredom in a lot of settings, Tony, but like library policy is really where the power of an institution lies, right? This is where we're making decisions about what we put online. This is where we make decisions about whose stories get told and how they get told. It's just in the policy itself. So if we can change the routine of a library's work, then we can start to chip away at the decades and centuries, in many cases, of white supremacist description and selection processes. And one of the things that I always try to focus on is pointing out that it was the routine decisions that got us in this situation. It wasn't one or two very, very, motivated, passionate white supremacists who happened to be in charge of cultural institutions. Rather, it was the mindset and the just daily, the routine of this is the type of thing that we collect. These are the ways that we describe them. We're describing them for the types of people we let in this institution. So we're going to tell other people's stories in a way that make us feel comfortable, because we don't have to worry about everybody walking in here, because we already have policies saying who can come in and who cannot. So yeah, I do appreciate that. Let me pause here. It looks like you have a question.
Well, more of an expounding, because what things that you point out are so layeredly rich, right? A lot of times when I'm talking to folks, and I'm using CRT as a context, I have to talk to them in a micro, talk to them for them to really get the structural or the embeddedness of something. I have to like maybe give them an example of how pervasive it is. So there's a micro dynamic, there's a meso dynamic, and there's that macro dynamic. And what I heard you say is that yes, the macro helps facilitate the structural, but you hit on something that I've been trying to articulate much better than I have, that a lot of what has kept librarianship in this narrowness of who's doing what, when, and how is at the meso level, right? And that meso level is often stepped over, or there's an expectation for folks to weave into it or become indoctrinated to it, or get on the job training and learn how to get those that cultural capital, and that social and professional capital happens in that meso. And then at the micro level, that's going to happen no matter where you're at and what you're doing. Some people you're going to click with, and other people you're going to have WTF moments with. Like you're scratching your head and like, where did they come from? But so you're going to have that anyway. But those nuances that you just brought up at the meso professional level of our field, I don't want folks to miss that. And it was very powerful.
Thank you for saying, yes. And I honestly think that's the case. And I like I said, I focus on this a little bit in a couple of different articles, but basically the point I was trying to make, and I try to make this a lot, and now I teach library school. I teach library classes, I should say. I teach classes on archival theory and archival practice, appraisal, but also information literacy. And one of the things that I'm always trying to stress is that our profession is very much policy driven. It is very much, we do things because we've always done it. Somebody started that and it's just kept the momentum going and going and going. Often because it's written down, but sometimes just because we've always done it. And our profession, we're very busy. Like those of us actually doing the work, we're very busy. We have a lot going on. And it's rarely, I should say, a situation during our day job. Rarely are we in a situation where we have time to think very deeply. The joke is when you tell somebody you're a librarian, they always say, oh my goodness, you must get to read so many books, right? As though we just sit around and read books. But really, like our job is just it's just constant. Like we're always doing stuff. And because of that, like we need the procedures in place. So if we have a procedure that says, simply copy this description from a finding aid and put it in this website, that's it. That's what everyone's going to be doing, whether they're student workers or whether they're middle management. If their task is defined to just replicate the descriptions that we already have in our collections, then there's nowhere to go from there. But if you can build into the system itself that we start to have conversations with each other, with people outside the field, et cetera, about the power of these descriptions and how thoughtful we should be, then that becomes the routine, right? Or at least it breaks the old routine to an extent that we can start to have these conversations. And so that's sort of the thing. Like, I'm very concerned about what policies say. I'm very concerned about how thoughtfully we're having these conversations with the new folks in our institutions who are coming in, the students who just graduated, or the people transferring over from other institutions, because it's a level of onboarding that's necessary to keep this ethos going. Because an ethos like this, the concerns like this run counter to so much in our society, right? We've got the mentality that we've got to keep our numbers up. We've got to keep things moving. We've got to keep going. So for us to be able to build within our day job space to slow down and think, that needs to be protected. And that's going to have to be protected and guarded so much more than any other aspect of our day job. And that's really where this intergenerational ability to pass this concern on. Because if all of us who are passionate about this and all of us who are making small progress in an institution all get up and leave at the same time, Tony, and we're all replaced, all that work can be erased immediately.